Welcome to the AJF Digital Hangout, where we're in Melbourne. We're coming down to the bottom of the world now to look at Australia and New Zealand in our roundup of what's happening in the contemporary jewellery world and in Australia to the traditional owners. And I begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri, whose land we're on at the moment. And we're joined now in a library. Firstly, if you'll say who you are.
Hello, I'm Kristin D'Agostino. I live in Auckland, New Zealand, and I'm here for Radiant Pavilion.
Kia ora, my name is Keri-Mei Zagrobelna, and I'm based in Wellington, New Zealand, and here for Radiant Pavilion also.
Thanks, Keri-Mei, and over to
me. Hi, I'm Zoe Brand. I'm currently in Canberra, Australia, and I have been to Radiant Pavilion.
And I'm Melinda Young. Sorry, I'm Melinda Young. I'm in Sydney, and I have also been to Radiant Pavilion, and I'm currently sitting by the harbour.
Can you show us something of the world around you, Mel? Just in case you don't believe in Australia at the moment.
It's a beautiful day in Sydney. It's a classic spring day.
Spring is on its way.
Sure is.
Okay, and also to let you know that the library is one of the sites of the Jewellery Festival Radiant Pavilion, and behind us at the moment, Mia Straka is conducting one of her talisman interviews where she'll be hammering out a word for someone. So we're in the thick of the action this morning. Round up now of what's happening in the different states. So we've got the Aotearoa New Zealand ambassador, Kristin D'Agostino, to tell us about what's happening in the world now.
Yeah. So New Zealand Contemporary Jewellery is alive and strong, and I think we were thinking of words, and vibrant and supportive were some of the thoughts we were coming up with. Object Space, which is a contemporary craft gallery, has just moved location, and so that's really excellent. Side of things, we've just heard that one of our lovely university programs is going to be closing its doors at the end of the year, so we're still hopeful that that may morph into a new opening of a new door, but yeah, dealing with changes in educational system. So, yeah.
And it certainly started up a conversation in the AJF Facebook page at the moment. So that's part of being part of an international community to share these issues. And Keri-Mei from Wellington.
Yes, so we've also been having the same discussions in Wellington in regards to contemporary jewellery community and the lack in funding in tertiary education and programs closed, and talking about how do we keep promoting contemporary jewellery and find these spaces within our community so that we can continue to exhibit.
Yeah. Anything else? Later. Okay. And now we go to Canberra and who's happening in the Australian scene as the Australian ambassador.
Luckily, I think we still have our jewellery school in Canberra. The ANU is probably one of the only universities left that has its workshops still as a whole. Most of the craft workshops end up amalgamating into another, potentially with ceramics and glass. But they're cutting weeks down, they're cutting hours down. So I'm unsure how anyone's going to learn technique and anything in 4 hours a week. So that's a little depressing, but, there's still lots of private little galleries who are running workshops and things like that. So I think there is hope for the future, and I think there are still galleries, at least in Canberra, and that are promoting, even if it's somewhat a little bit of desperate times, I guess.
Okay, and certainly I think looking around at places which are developing the contemporary jewellery scenes, even like countries like Venezuela, Chile, and so on. Australia and New Zealand is an example of how jewellery scenes can develop outside the centres of Europe and North America.
And I think outside of the institutional centres as well. And I think that's where Australia will end up having to go, is private craft and training workshops to get training, because I don't think the institutions give or are interested anymore.
Right. And are you seeing signs of that, Zoe?
Certainly. I mean, I think Mel can probably talk about this more, about Sydney College of the Arts in Sydney, which is having to close their whole art school and then reopening in a much, much smaller capacity. And I don't know how workshops roll. I mean, Mel, is that what would...
It's happening in Sydney. I think we are trying to remain really optimistic and hopeful about the new iteration of jewellery and object at Sydney College of the Arts when it moves over to the main campus of Sydney University. Certainly, I guess the workshops will need to be smaller, but I'm really hopeful about the future of that course there. I teach at the University of New South Wales Art and Design, and we certainly, although we have 3 hours a week contact with our students, we certainly have managed to develop a thriving community of makers within the workshop space there, which is really encouraging. And also outside of the formal university and TAFE-based institutions in Sydney, there's a real groundswell of artist-run spaces teaching both private lessons. So Bridget Kennedy at Studio 2017 Project Space has been doing that. Places like Square Peg Studios in Marrickville have a really extensive range of workshops that they offer in jewellery practice, which really supports the formal education. And also places, galleries like the Australian Design Centre and organisations are really returning to craft. Craft was a very dirty word in Sydney for a long time, and it's now becoming a safe word again. We're seeing a real resurgence of that. Australian Design Centre are putting on the inaugural Sydney Craft Week next month, which is really exciting, and a whole lot of galleries and institutions around Sydney and individual artists in their studios are getting involved with that, which is really wonderful. So I think I'm feeling really good about what's happening in Sydney. I hope I'm right. It's been a bit of a rough patch, probably the last 10 to 15 years, and I think people are coming back around to the idea of craft again, which is
Mel,
heartening.
you think of what's happening in the capital cities, but also been involved in some projects with remote Aboriginal communities. Can you tell us about the Indigenous Jewellery Project?
So I've been really fortunate the last 2 years to travel with the Indigenous Jewellery Project, which is the brainchild of curator and writer Emily McCulloch-Childs, who has a gallery in Whistlewood on the Mornington Peninsula in Victoria. And she's instigated this project to bring contemporary jewellery practice and ideas to Aboriginal art centres. So we've been to Ernabella in the APY lands of South Australia, and more recently and more consistently to Buku Mulka Lange, which is in Yirrkala in northeast Arnhem Land. We've done 3 workshops there, working with the artists, looking at reimagining the traditional necklace stringing techniques, and also working with lost wax carving processes. Many of the artists that we work with are printmakers, and we've been having a really interesting time playing with the translation of the 2D print through to the 3D wearable. So it's been a really fun and engaging project. And that's actually going to be shown as part of Sydney Craft Week at the Australian Design Centre. So we've been fortunate with great support from them, and also from you, Kevin, through Garland Magazine and other outlets. So thank you.
Well, that's really something to look forward to in the Australian scene. But we're here in Melbourne now, and we're coming to the end of Radiant Pavilion. So it's a good opportunity to reflect on what this festival's been like. Kristin, do you want to share your thoughts about what's stood out for you? You've been here for the last few days.
Yep. I got here on Friday evening, and I think it's been a really, really wonderful opportunity to make personal connections and see work and people at the same time. It seems to me to have a nice size to it that you can see enough of the same people with the same booklet that you are able to have conversations on the trams and in the streets and recognize the other contemporary jewelers, which I find really nice. It's exciting to see how the jewelry's been placed into contemporary art spaces or bookshops, and like alternative venues. I really love the Paved with Gold project of particularly Vivian Atkinson's walking. She walked for 20 hours up and down a little laneway to replicate the walk from Melbourne to the goldfields. I think that her great grandmother would have done, but it was some really lovely moments through the city that's been really fun to experience.
Right, it's sort of performance.
Yeah.
Element in this festival too.
Yeah.
Keri-Mei?
I think the highlight has been those personal connections that you've been able to make with other makers, because often we are working with technology and having these discussions online, so to meet someone in person has been fantastic. And also all the alternative jewellery spaces, and wondering if that is especially for the new emerging jewellers I see here, is a sort of their reaction to the lack of galleries to show in and alleyways, other areas to introduce jewellery is is this a comment on what is happening? And it's kind of exciting because if this is happening now, I wonder in the future. So Radiant Pavilion has been very exciting, and just seeing the wide breadth of what it can be through either performance or video or live kind of discussions where you're not actually wearing the jewellery, but you're all together, and that's still based around that jewellery subject. So yeah, it's been pretty fantastic.
Good.
Yeah.
And Zoe?
Yeah,
You've been here, no longer here, but you were here at the start.
Yeah,
what stood out for you?
I was there for a whole week, and I think I got the whole gambit of everything. Not only did I have a show, I was in a few shows, but also I was at the conference, and I attended a workshop as well as going to as many exhibitions as I possibly could. So spending a whole week really immersed, thinking not only about my own practice, but what it is that we're doing in contemporary jewellery. I mean, I think one of the highlights for me was someone who wasn't in the jewellery community coming to our exhibition, though. So we're still looking in and being, is it for us? Is it for other people? I don't know if it necessarily matters, but it's interesting when you can get out to someone else and have a discussion about contemporary jewellery to a not initiated person, I think. So I think there were certainly moments of that, but I think it was also really nice to, again, as everyone's saying, having those personal connections and going from the internet world to the real world and, having a beer, catching up with someone, moving through exhibitions and seeing what their thoughts on something was and if it grated against yours or if it agreed with yours. And all those dialogues I think was really exciting. But do we need to look out a bit further to see if we can gauge a slightly wider audience, or does it really matter? I'm still thinking about that.
And how would you compare it to other jewellery festivals you might have seen?
So I was recently at Schmuck at the beginning of the year in Munich, and I felt the quality of work here was much, much higher. And I think the shows were slightly more curated or considered, or the display. But I think that may have something to do with that these Australians and New Zealanders don't have that far to go. So most people having to pack up all their stuff and take it to Germany and display, I think, is you know, has a slight hindrance, whereas I think a lot of the people were local who were showing, so they possibly knew the space they were showing in, and, you know, the work had been made specifically for that as well. So I think, yeah, I think being in two different places is very interesting. And I was at Radiant Pavilion the first year round, which was a little smaller than this year. I think there's 80 exhibitions this year, as well as the conference, as well as workshops. And I think all the things that stand out are the slightly more performative things that you can't necessarily experience on an online platform. And I think that's indicative of being in a place. And I think that's really great to be in a place. Whereas I think a lot of the exhibitions we see are from Instagram, or we're capturing moments, and that's how you're engaging with something, is just through an image. So being in the back of an ice cream van and being asked to instruct someone to make an earring hook is a very interesting sort of experience. But again, are we still feeding into our own selves and not? Yeah, I'm not sure. It's a struggle that I'm having at the moment of how do
Well,
we...
it's important and maybe good to compare other festivals and how the audience grows.
Yeah, certainly.
Maybe the performative side is a positive mention in the festival. But you, Mel,
I found the
now
performative.
obviously,
Sorry, I found the performative aspects that I encountered to be the most engaging and strongest, and they were certainly the things that I sought out. I was only in Melbourne very briefly for a little bit less than 3 days, so I saw as many exhibitions as I could. I attended the conference. It's great to reconnect with your peers from around Australia and from New Zealand, and these opportunities are few and far between. We keep in touch online, but that opportunity to have a conversation face to face and to touch and feel and really physically engage with work, is, you know, like immeasurable. But this time I was really struck by the occupation artist intervention in Crossley Street. That was, for me, just beautiful. Being able to sit with Vivienne and hear her family connection to the walk to Ballarat, and then understand Kelly's connections to the goldfields through her family as well, and to take the time to have those conversations. I was so lucky, Crossley Street deserted. I had Viv all to myself. It was just such a magical interaction, and that's been a real highlight for me. Also then watching other people who aren't jewellers interact with those spaces and those interventions was really interesting. I also took part in Roseanne and Linda's PDF exchange in the ice cream van, and that outside Zoe and Claire's opening, actually, and that was like being in a little goldfish bowl. The performative aspect of it, the pressure, it was really such an interesting exchange. And Roseanne writing down, when you're in there, she makes a list of the verbs you use as you're instructing. And for me as a teacher, that was just such a powerful gift to be given at the end of that exchange, possibly more than anything about it, was to sort of really understand a little bit about that personal kind of thing. So it's always an amazing thing to do. I had one little woven work in one exhibition as part of the program, and that was really nice to just have the last jewellery conference I was on the organising committee. It was really nice to be a guest and a visitor and a participator in a really different way this time. It's magic. It was so good. And really the performative aspects of it was so strong, I felt.
yeah, well, that is certainly something which touches on Melbourne as a city. The fact that it has these lanes, which is conducive to more intimate encounters.
Absolutely.
But also has this history of gold swell, which is where Melbourne has got wealth. Now, we've got about 7 minutes left. And so I'm going to put everyone on the spot now. Everybody's prepared for this. But it's a question that actually is asked of people of different countries, and that is, the degree to which you think, say, New Zealand or Australia jewellery scene is a identity? Do you think that there's a certain style for you that makes New Zealand or Australian jewellery different to other countries, or is that a stupid question? One that has been superseded by a more globalised world. On the spot.
I think it's a good question, and I think, but I'm going to answer it in a little bit of a different way. I think it's the way that contemporary jewellery is alive in that country. So I was originally born in the US, so I like to sometimes think I have an outside view in New Zealand. And the thing that really strikes me about New Zealand and Melbourne is that people wear jewellery, and they wear contemporary jewellery, they wear traditional jewellery, like brooches. You see them on the street, and it's very much alive, and it's very much a conversation that is in the collective conscious. So the jump from traditional jewellery to contemporary jewellery isn't as large as, so traditional to contemporary to conceptual, and public seem to be able to follow that. Also with the history of the region and Pacific Adornment being such a strong and recognizable aspect of the culture with super wonderful meaning and depth. I think it's a really rich and interesting and recognizable for New Zealand in its own wonderful special way.
Well, it's interesting about the connection to jewellery practice. Keri-Mei, any thoughts, particularly from a Māori perspective?
Well, I do think that New Zealand contemporary jewellery does hold its own identity quite strongly, and I'm not too sure if we are the younger discovered nation. So there is, even though we have historically and culturally we have very strong Māori adornment culture, we are not as old as maybe some of the European countries with historical context and stuff behind us. So for me, I feel in a way we potentially might have more freedom, and we're possibly more ready to go out and explore lots of ideas or concepts because of how isolated we are at the end of the world, not as influenced by other things around the world, but very much comes from who we are, where we are, from the heart, and what is immediately around us, little Pacific Island.
And I guess one more thing to that is like the more I learn about Māori culture, the more it's like everything has such a specific and well thought out purpose. So like when I see adornment, actually that might have all these meanings and purposes that I don't know, but that knowledge is there. And sometimes I think that maybe, like Maori was not a written language, but it was almost like an object language. Like everything is recorded through those objects or those carvings or those weaving. And I think it just makes it really, really interesting to learn more about. And I think it's super interesting to see how young makers are often incorporating that and their identity might be a mixed identity and sort of moving into more contemporary spaces. And to me, that's super, super exciting and still really quite fresh and like really continually being rejuvenated, I guess.
Living and thriving.
Yeah.
And so sometimes the lack of history might even be an advantage relative to short history. Your thoughts, Zoe?
I make quite large work, and when I sell it in New Zealand, the New Zealanders put it on and wear it out the door. When I sell it in Australia, the jewelers or the people who purchase it put it straight on the wall. And so I feel like that's a very, that's a telling sign, I think. I think Australia is still a very conservative nation in so many ways. But I think that we're cracking through a little bit. But I do look at New Zealand and I don't know if Mel feels the same, but it also could be the grass is always greener. That there's this delightful land across the ditch that has beautiful galleries that can sell your work, and the people wear it, and it's large and it's wonderful. And sometimes in Australia, it's difficult to find collectors or people who were brave enough or willing enough. I mean, there you go, Mel, nodding her head. I think it's very hard to find an audience.
When we had the hangout,
Pardon?
when we had the hangout in North America, one of the issues from the Canadian perspective was the difficulty in having a national scene when your country is so wide. And the West Coast doesn't really connect with the East Coast. It connects more with, say, the West Coast of the United States. Do you feel that the Australian scene is well connected at the moment? Are these differences very, very important, or are we kind of more isolated into our pockets?
I feel as that the jewelry community as such is quite well connected. I know everyone from, all the states, I think, and territories. But whether or not that expands to a visual identity, I mean, you could go Australian kitsch and be very Australian, but then, that's something I'm struggling with myself, is what is my identity as an uneasy Australian? We have so many political issues and around, the traditional owners of our land. And I describe myself as an uneasy Australian, and I don't know how that then translates into a jewellery scene as such in terms of an identity of what we make, I think. But maybe Mel's got something more to say about that.
Maybe a very generative position. What about Mel? Do you think?
I think I agree wholeheartedly with what Zoe said, particularly about adventurous and unadventurous, whereas I've had the same experience showing my work in New Zealand and Australia. And I do wonder if it is, I'm not sure. I mean, I agree also with Zoe in terms of being an uneasy Australian for so many reasons. And I think there's a lot that we need to fix here. I also see contemporary jewellers in Australia really exploring place and exploring the land. There have been some really nice projects recently where jewellers have undertaken residencies in remote areas such as the Pilbara, Penny Jagiello and Nikki Hepburn and others have done some really beautiful work as a result of their time spent in that area. And so I think there's that sense of trying to discover place and discover the land as uneasy, and that uneasiness of being a white Australian or a non-Indigenous Australian, I think comes through in people's work in many ways. I don't know. I mean, I know for me personally, my work is increasingly about exploring this place through the natural materials or through found materials, through detritus and the cast-offs. And that seems to be, maybe it's just because that's what I'm doing, that I'm really in tune with other people who are doing that. And there seems to be a real groundswell of people working in that way in Australia now. I don't know if that makes or defines a certain sense of Australianness, because people do it in other countries too. But I think that fascination with flora, particularly, and botany in particular, and the land is perhaps still going on. It's trickled through from colonial art practice, I guess, and maybe now we're creating a kind of post-colonial contemporary jewellery practice. I'm not sure. It's an interesting question.
Sounds, Mel, that contemporary jewellery in Australia is up for that challenge, and it's fantastic. She could talk about connection between jewellery and the land from where you are at the moment. It's very literal. So we've come to the end now. So thank you very much for sharing, Kristin.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Keri-Mei.
Thank you.
And
I'm sorry, I can't
background who's been dispensing promises as we're speaking. And Zoe, thank you very much.
Not a problem.
And Mel, all the best in the great outdoors. We hope you return safely. Maybe she's already been lost. It's the problem with Australia. No crocodiles, snakes, all these things. Thank you very much.